Now to the presidential election. Donald Trump has closed the gap in a potential general election matchup with Hillary Clinton. Two new polls have them in a statistical dead heat. After trailing Clinton in March by 9 points, a new ABC News Washington Post poll shows Trump now ahead by 2 points. And a new poll from NBC News and Wall Street Journal shows Hillary Clinton's advantage over Donald Trump has narrowed to just 3 points. In April, Clinton held an 11-point advantage over Trump, 50% to 39%. Washington Post reporter Ed O'Keefe is in Washington, and here with me in New York is Lis Smith, Democratic strategist and former deputy campaign manager for the O'Malley campaign. All right, thanks to both of you for being with me. Liz, let me start with you. So Hillary Clinton has consistently led Donald Trump by double digits, really, since December. Are you surprised that this gap has tightened?
Well, you know, first of all, I've learned not to be surprised about anything when it comes to Donald Trump. He defies all political conventional wisdom and all political gravity. I think traditionally, though, what we've seen in 2012 when I worked for Barack Obama, we saw that Mitt Romney, after a very bruising primary, came through and kind of had a bump after that primary. So I think it's pretty traditional. But what I think is most surprising is the gulf between GOP elites and GOP voters. Because if you had listened to Mitt Romney and people like that just a few weeks ago, they would have told you the sky was falling, the end of the GOP was nigh if Donald Trump were to become the nominee. And look where we are now. He's virtually tied with Secretary Clinton. So I'm not completely surprised, but I think that it shows that the Clinton campaign has its work cut out for them.
Ed, let me turn to you. Neither candidate has a favorability rating above 50%. So what does that say about the nature of a Trump-Clinton matchup?
It says it's going to be a race between two people that Americans don't like, frankly. And what's also fascinating is our survey at least found that a good chunk of the supporters for each of these guys is voting for them because they just simply don't like the other person. 48% of the Clinton support is voting for her because they oppose Trump. 53% of Trump support is because they mainly oppose Mrs. Clinton. That shows you that this is really a race between two options that most Americans just are not inspired by, are not excited about at this juncture. And with so many more months to go, you wonder what either of these two will do to inspire their base and really try to convince undecided voters that they should vote for them and not necessarily against the other person. Although we may actually get to a point where the polling is so strong on that sentiment that they just simply have to run against the other person in order to win.
Well, and just to Ed's point, you know, and I think those numbers are really stunning. This is going to be a challenge for both campaigns because no one ever gets elected to president by saying, I'm not the other guy, or in this case, not the other gal. And so the big challenge, I think, for the Clinton campaign is to figure out how do we make an affirmative case for her? How do we make her more popular? How do we come out with a big message? Because right now, it seems like their strategy is just kind of running as, I'm not Donald Trump. And so I'd like to see where they're going to go in terms of making an affirmative case for her.
All right, Liz, I have to ask you, what is going on with this Democratic disunity that we have seen? You know, there was this chaos in Nevada that we saw at the Democratic State Convention. Now you've got this back and forth, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, the chair of the DNC, you've got Senator Sanders. Tell me how you see things playing out. Did you ever expect that it would get to this kind of point?
Well, look, I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz being party chair is a very thankless job. And I think Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the Democrat that every Democrat likes to hate for whether it's valid or not. And I think she's been a very divisive party chair in terms of the way that she's handled the primary. So I think that her role here has exacerbated some of the tensions. I think that there's some other issues. I think there's some delusions on both the part of the Sanders campaign and the Clinton campaign. I think Sanders is being a little bit intellectually dishonest with his supporters by saying they're going to go all the way to the convention, because I really don't see how he can do that. And I think he's whipping them up into a fervor where there's really no win for them at the end.
Because you think the math is just
Yeah. And also I think with the Clinton campaign, I do think that there's delusion on their part too, because I think they're misreading the support among their partisans as some widespread enthusiasm for her campaign. And really, the only people who are enthusiastic about her are probably the same people who were enthusiastic about her in 2008. She goes into this general election the most disliked nominee in history. And so I think that everyone kind of needs to address the realities here. I think the Clinton campaign needs to embrace the passion and excitement that the Sanders people do. I think Sanders needs to figure out a realistic way to kind of exit this race and give his supporters a way to back Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, and how do you see this gulf? Can Bernie Sanders get his supporters eventually? Do you think there'll be a point in which those people who have been so passionate, as you know, when you see the rallies or if you just look at social media, there is a fervor and a passion to the Bernie Sanders campaign that is undeniable. But now you've got this acrimony and this rancor. Do you see a way in which eventually those supporters might go and back Hillary Clinton?
Very easily, if you believe the recent surveys, because roughly 3/4 of his supporters say they would support her if she becomes the nominee. You even hear him talk about it in some of his recent interviews, sort of the foreboding the possibility that it gets to that point, that he's made clear he would support her at some point. I think what's concerning is whether any of his support in significant ways, especially in key battleground states, breaks to Donald Trump in a way that could help him. Places like Pennsylvania, perhaps, or some of those industrial Midwest states that are economically distressed and where he had such great appeal during the primary process. But most of those supporters, I think, they're going to come home to her, as we're seeing Republicans do now that Trump has consolidated and has essentially won the nomination, because they understand that the alternative to her is far worse than him.
All right, they're circling the wagons. Okay, Ed O'Keefe and Lis Smith, thank you so much.